Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a place that's somehow darker than a dungeon, smellier than a barn, and filled with more regret than a medieval stew. Welcome to the brothel, where romance goes to die and hygiene never checked in. Before you get too comfortable, like the video and subscribe if you enjoy drifting off to mildly disturbing, deeply factual history. Close your eyes. Imagine a medieval town. The year is long forgotten, but the cobblestone streets still echo faintly under the weight of footsteps that once walked them. A gentle wind carries the scent of wood smoke, roasted meat, and something less innocent, the perfume of wine and desire. The streets are narrow here, shadows stretching like old fingers between buildings that lean closer together, as if whispering secrets. A faint drizzle taps the rooftops, softening the sound of distant horse hooves. Among the taverns and dimly lit shops stands a building you might overlook at first. Its windows glow faintly, a lantern swinging gently by the door. Outside, laughter spills, the kind of laughter that is both warm and tired, half joy, half melancholy. This is not a church, nor a marketplace. It is something in between heaven and earth, sin and survival. It is a brothel of the Middle Ages. Inside, time seems to slow. The air smells of spiced wine and candle wax. The floor creaks beneath heavy boots. Men arrive with flushed faces, carrying coins, carrying loneliness, carrying secrets. Women move gracefully, painted lips curving into smiles that are both welcoming and weary. The brothel is more than a place of pleasure. It is a stage where society's contradictions play out. The church condemns it, yet its priests sometimes visit. The rulers denounce it, yet collect taxes from its earnings. Ordinary people pretend to ignore it, yet its doors are never truly closed. Here, in these dimly lit rooms, history breathes differently. The walls whisper stories of laughter, of sorrow, of whispered promises, and broken dreams. So let us linger here, not as judges, but as quiet observers. Let us move slowly, gently, through these halls of shadow and candlelight to understand not only what people did, but who they were. For tonight, this story is not about knights or kings, but about the quiet, hidden world of women who lived, worked, and dreamed behind these red doors. Step with me now, through the door of that lantern-lit house. The world outside fades, replaced by a different rhythm. Softer, warmer, yet heavy with unspoken truths. The first thing you notice is the air, thick with candle smoke, faint perfumes, and the musky scent of too many bodies gathered close together. The sound of rain against the window fades beneath laughter, whispers, and the gentle strum of a lute in the corner. The brothel, unlike the streets, does not rush. Time here stretches. Men take off their cloaks, shaking off the night, while women approach with graceful, measured steps. Each movement feels rehearsed, yet behind every smile lingers something human. A story untold, a life beyond these walls. Candles flicker along the wooden beams, their light reflecting in bronze cups filled with wine. A serving girl carries a tray, balancing goblets with steady hands. She's not a courtesan, but part of the world nonetheless, earning her keep, surviving one night at a time. There are rules here, though they are not written on the walls. A woman must smile, but not too much. She must welcome, but also protect herself. A man must pay, but also respect the unspoken boundaries. Behind the curtains, arrangements are made quietly, without boasting or shame. The rooms upstairs are small, with straw mattresses and wooden shutters. Some have velvet drapes, others only simple sheets. The wealth of the visitor often decides the comfort of the night. Yet in both fine rooms and plain, stories unfold. Stories of desire, of loneliness, of fleeting comfort. The brothel is not only a house of pleasure, it is also a house of survival. Many women here were once poor farmers' daughters, widows or wanderers with nowhere else to go. For them, this place is shelter, protection from the hunger and cold beyond its doors. And yet, in this candlelit world, dreams still live. A girl hums softly as she brushes her hair, perhaps thinking of a life she once knew, or a life she still hopes for. A man lingers after his drink, perhaps not for pleasure, but simply for company, for the sound of another human voice in the lonely hours of night. As the night deepens, the brothel becomes its own small universe. Outside, the church bells may ring, reminding the world of sin and salvation. But inside, sin is survival, and survival is life. So, let us sit quietly here by the corner of the fire. Let us watch without judgment how these women move through their nights, half in shadow, half in light, carrying the weight of history in every gentle smile. Let us look more closely now at the women who lived within these candlelit walls. Each one carries a story, sometimes whispered, sometimes lost to time, but always etched into their eyes. Some were once farmers' daughters, their hands rough from working the fields, who came to the city with dreams of something better. When hunger tightened its grip and the streets grew cold, the brothel became a refuge, even if it was not the life they had hoped for. Others arrived after loss. A husband gone to war, never to return. A family swept away by sickness, leaving them alone. In such times, a woman's choices were few, and survival demanded sacrifice. The brothel offered shelter, food, warmth, and in return, a piece of herself. There were also women who carried secrets. A noble woman who had fallen from grace, finding her way here after scandal. Or a runaway bride who fled a marriage she could not bear, hiding her name beneath new makeup and new laughter. But beyond their pasts, there is something shared among them all, the strength to endure. In every careful smile, every graceful movement, there lies resilience, a quiet courage that often goes unseen. At night, when the last guests have gone and the candles burn low, the women gather together in whispers. They share stories, sing soft songs, or brush one another's hair. These quiet moments are theirs alone, a small slice of tenderness in a world that often forgets to be kind. And sometimes, in the solitude of their rooms, they dream. They dream of a small cottage far from the city, of children laughing in a sunlit field, of love untainted by coins exchanged in the dark. The brothel is a place of survival, but it is also a place of hope. For hope cannot be extinguished, not even here. It flickers like the last candle of the night, fragile but unyielding, lighting a path, however uncertain, toward tomorrow. So when you imagine these women, do not see only the roles they played for men. See the quiet strength behind their eyes, the lives they carried before, and the dreams they carried still. For in them, as in all of us, lived a longing for more than the world ever gave. Now, let us turn our gaze toward the men who entered these houses of flickering light. They came by night, cloaks pulled tight against the cold, faces hidden beneath the shadows of their hoods. Each carried his own reason for stepping across that threshold. At night, when the last guests have gone and the candles burn low, the women gather together in whispers. They share stories, sing soft songs, or brush one another's hair. These quiet moments are theirs alone, a small slice of tenderness in a world that often forgets to be kind. And sometimes, in the solitude of their rooms, they dream. They dream of a small cottage far from the city, of children laughing in a sunlit field, of love untainted by coins exchanged in the dark. The brothel is a place of survival, but it is also a place of hope. For hope cannot be extinguished, not even here. It flickers like the last candle of the night, fragile but unyielding, lighting a path, however uncertain, toward tomorrow. So, when you imagine these women, do not see only the roles they played for men. See the quiet strength behind their eyes, the lives they carried before, and the dreams they carried still. For in them, as in all of us, lived a longing for more than the world ever gave. Now, let us turn our gaze toward the men who entered these houses of flickering light. They came by night, cloaks pulled tight against the cold, faces hidden beneath the shadows of their hoods. Each carried his own reason for stepping across that threshold. Some were wealthy merchants, their purses heavy with coin, seeking to forget the burdens of trade and the constant chase of fortune. For them, the brothel was an escape, a place where gold could buy warmth, company, and the illusion of ease. Others were soldiers, scarred from battles, tired of sleeping on hard ground beneath an empty sky. They came not only for pleasure, but for comfort, the comfort of a voice speaking softly to them, the comfort of a hand that did not strike but soothed. There were also scholars, priests, and men of rank. Some came quietly, with guilt hanging over their shoulders like a cloak of stone. Others came boldly, as though sin could be hidden by silence. In the dark, even the most pious found themselves human again, vulnerable to desire. And then there were the lonely, the men who sought not passion, but simple companionship, a place to sit, to share a cup of wine, to speak to someone who would listen. For them, the brothel was not about sin or secrecy. It was about not being alone. Each man carried his own story. Some left laughter behind, others left tears. Some came once and never returned, while others became part of the nightly rhythm, their visits as regular as the tolling of the church bell. The brothel, for them, was like a mirror. It reflected not just desire, but need, the need to feel alive, to escape sorrow, to quiet the thoughts that haunted them in the silence of their chambers. And as dawn approached, they would rise again, pulling their cloaks tightly, vanishing back into the streets, their footsteps fading into the mist, their faces lost among the crowd, their secrets carried away with them. Yet, for a few hours each night, their lives intersected with the women inside. And in that fragile meeting, two worlds touched, briefly, quietly, then drifted apart once more. If you pause for a moment and listen closely, you can almost hear it. The hum of the brothel at night. There's the soft strumming of a lute, its strings humming like a heartbeat in the shadows. A tune not meant for grandeur, but for comfort. Slow, low, soothing. Goblets of wine pass from hand to hand, the deep red liquid glowing in the candlelight. It tastes of spice and warmth, loosening the tongues of men and women alike. With each sip, laughter grows softer, confessions flow more freely, and the night itself seems to breathe easier. The air carries scents of burning wax, of roasted meat drifting in from the kitchens, of perfume dabbed carefully on wrists and necks. Together they mingle, creating an atmosphere thick with warmth and mystery. In the corners, whispers rise like smoke, secrets exchanged, promises made, lies wrapped in sweet words. Here, men speak of their fears, of the battles they fought, of fortunes lost and won. And the women listen, sometimes with interest, sometimes only with patience. But beyond the noise, there is stillness too. The crackle of the fire in the hearth, the creak of the old wooden beams above, the distant toll of a church bell announcing the hour, all blending together into a lullaby of the night. This was the rhythm of the brothel, a rhythm not of chaos, but of calm, a place where shadows danced with candlelight, where the weight of the outside world dissolved into wine and song. For those within, it was not only a house of pleasure, but a sanctuary of forgetting. Here, at least for a few hours, one could set aside the burdens of life and let the night carry them away. Beyond the laughter, beyond the music and the shared cups of wine, there were doors, wooden doors, worn by time, each leading to a chamber where the night grew quieter and secrets unfolded. Inside these rooms, the world felt smaller, the stone walls softened by tapestries, a single candle flickering on the table, shadows moving gently across the bed. The noise of the main hall faded until it was no more than a distant hum, leaving only two people and the silence between them. Not every meeting was about passion. Some men sat on the edge of the bed and simply spoke, their words spilling out after being locked away for too long. Stories of grief, of lost loves, of wounds on their bodies and their hearts. And the women listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes offering a hand that said, without words, "You are not alone tonight." Others came seeking laughter, a brief spark of joy in the dimness, a playful word, a shared smile, a reminder that even in a hard world, warmth could still exist. And yes, many came for desire, for the fleeting embrace, the closeness of another body, the escape from loneliness that intimacy can bring. But even then, it was not always only about flesh. Often, it was about being seen, if only for an hour, being noticed, being acknowledged in a world that often turned its face away. Some men wept in those rooms, though they would never admit it outside. Some spoke names in the dark, names that did not belong to the woman beside them, and some closed their eyes, pretending for a moment that they were not who they were, but someone freer, someone lighter. The women, too, carried secrets of their own. They smiled when needed, but in their eyes lay memories, families left behind, dreams forgotten, a longing for something beyond the heavy wooden walls. Yet in those small rooms, they played their part. They became companions, lovers, confidants, 1,000 roles, all within a single night. Behind every door, there was a story. Behind every whisper, a truth half hidden. And when the candle finally burned low, When the door creaked open again, the secret dissolved into the night, carried away, unspoken, yet never forgotten. Outside the warm glow of the brothel, another presence loomed, the church. Its bells rang each morning, echoing over rooftops, reminding the people of sin, of virtue, of heaven and hell. And though the brothel stood in shadow, everyone inside felt the weight of those bells. The priests spoke often, their sermons heavy with warnings. They called such places dens of corruption, doors to eternal damnation. To them, the brothel was a wound on the soul of the city, and yet, those same priests, some whispered, were seen walking its streets at night, their hoods drawn low, their eyes avoiding the light. It was a strange contradiction of the time. Society condemned these women, yet relied on them. Men spoke loudly of morality in public, but sought comfort in silence after dusk. The brothel became both condemned and necessary, a paradox woven into the fabric of medieval life. The women themselves bore this contradiction most deeply. By day, they felt the stares, the judgment, the whispered insults when they walked the marketplace. By night, they became the keepers of men's secrets, their companions, their escape. And still faith lingered even here. Some women carried small crosses around their necks, whispering prayers before sleep. Some lit candles, not only for their customers, but for their own forgiveness. For in their hearts, many still believed that God might understand the weight they carried. The shadow of the church stretched over every stone, every wooden beam, but the brothel endured. It endured not out of defiance, but out of human need. Because in a world where suffering was constant, where hunger, war, and plague walked daily alongside the people, the longing for warmth, for closeness, for comfort could not be silenced, even by the tolling of church bells. And so, the brothel existed in twilight, neither fully accepted nor ever truly destroyed. A place caught between sin and survival, morality and humanity. Behind every laugh, behind every whisper, there was always one more truth: money. The brothel was not just a house of pleasure, it was a business, a living machine that turned desire into survival. Coins clinked as they changed hands, silver and copper shining in the flicker of candlelight. For many women, this was their only livelihood. They did not choose the path out of luxury, but out of necessity. Some were widows, left with no husband to provide. Others were daughters of poverty, sold or pushed by desperate families. And some, cast aside by society for mistakes or scandals, found the brothel as their only refuge. Each night, earnings were carefully measured. A portion went to the madam, who managed the house, kept peace, and paid bribes to city guards. Another portion went to food, to wine, to fresh sheets, to candles that burned long into the night. And what remained, often less than expected, was tucked away by the women, a fragile thread of security in a dangerous world. But this economy stretched far beyond the brothel walls. Tavern owners nearby profited from the visitors who drank before entering. Tailors earned by sewing gowns and veils for the women. Even the city itself, though condemning the trade, collected its share in hidden taxes and silent payments. Desire fueled more than fleeting moments of comfort. It fed markets. It turned the wheels of trade. It gave survival to some, power to others, and secrets to those who knew how to listen. And yet, for all the coins exchanged, the value was never just in silver. For many who entered, the true currency was something else: A smile, a touch, a moment of being heard. Things no marketplace could measure, but which kept the brothel alive as surely as gold, yet beneath the soft glow of candlelight, danger always lingered. The brothel was a place of warmth, but outside its doors, shadows grew long. Violence was never far away. Not every visitor came with gentle intentions. Some came drunk, angry, or desperate, and their tempers flared like sparks in dry straw. The women learned to read faces quickly, a twitch of the eyes, a clenched jaw, the smell of too much ale, all warnings that the night could turn. The madam kept order as best she could, sometimes with words, sometimes with hired guards who waited in the corners, watching silently until needed. But even so, harm was a constant threat. Bruises, broken promises, stolen coins, all were part of this world. Then there were the darker dangers. Thieves who lurked in the alleys nearby, waiting for wealthy men stumbling out after midnight. Rival gangs who saw the brothel not as a home, but as a prize, a place to control, to extort, to bleed. And beyond violence, there was illness. No doctor came willingly to these women. Remedies were whispered in secret. Herbs boiled in small pots, charms tied with string, prayers murmured in desperation. Some survived, some did not, and rumors of the plague haunted every shadow, reminding all that life could vanish as swiftly as a candle's flame. Yet despite it all, the brothel endured. Its walls became both sanctuary and snare, protecting those within while trapping them at the same time. It was a fragile balance, safety and peril walking hand in hand. And still, each night, the lanterns were lit again, the doors opened, and voices filled the halls, for danger was constant in the medieval world. But so, too, was the need for comfort. And between the two, the brothel lived on, like a candle in the wind, trembling, but unbroken. Inside those walls, not everything was sorrow and struggle. There was also friendship, quiet, unspoken, but strong. The women lived together, night after night, sharing the same risks, the same hopes, the same fragile dreams. Over time, they became more than just co-workers. They became sisters. In the stillness of the early morning, when the last visitor had gone, and only the sound of rain remained, the women often sat together. They brushed each other's hair, told stories from their past, or hummed lullabies that reminded them of childhood. Some laughed at the absurdities of their lives. Others wept softly, knowing only those around them could truly understand. They protected one another. If a man grew rough, another woman might distract him, turning his anger away. If sickness came, the others would bring herbs, warm water, and comfort. If one felt hopeless, another would whisper encouragement, reminding her that even in this life of shadows, they were not alone. These bonds were fragile, yet powerful. A shared glance across a crowded hall, a soft squeeze of the hand, the comfort of knowing someone cared. These were the treasures the world outside could never give. In a way, this hidden sisterhood was their true survival. For while coins could be stolen and promises broken, the loyalty of these friendships endured. In the darkest nights, it was often the only light they had. And so, within the brothel, behind doors the world condemned, there bloomed a kind of love, not the kind paid for with silver, but the kind freely given between souls who refused to let hardship steal their humanity. Outside the brothel's warm walls, another power loomed large: the church. In the medieval world, religion was everywhere. Bells rang across towns at dawn and dusk, prayers echoed through cathedrals, and priests spoke of sin and salvation. For many, the brothel stood as a place of shame, a wound upon the soul of the city. The sermons declared the women fallen and their visitors weak, drowning in temptation. Yet reality was far more complicated. Even as the church condemned these houses, it tolerated them too. Towns were often safer when desire had a place to hide, and coins collected from brothels sometimes found their way into city coffers, even into the hands of bishops. Morality, it seemed, was often entangled with necessity. For the women, the judgment was heavy. To the world, they were sinners, unworthy of respect. But within their hearts, many still clung to faith. They lit candles in secret, whispered prayers before sleep, and asked for forgiveness, not because they felt evil, but because the world told them they must. There was a quiet irony in this, that those who judged them often walked the same streets at night, cloaked and silent, seeking the very comfort they condemned in daylight. And so the brothel became a mirror reflecting society's contradictions, a place both scorned and sought, cursed and needed. For the women inside, it was not theology that mattered most. It was survival, friendship, and the small sparks of tenderness that kept them human. And while the church's voice rang out over the land, theirs was softer, but no less true. Time in a brothel moved differently. Nights blurred into mornings, and mornings slipped into nights again, until the seasons themselves felt like shadows passing by. For the youngest women, those first days were filled with shock. The strangeness of new faces, the weight of survival pressing heavy on their hearts. But slowly, the routine dulled the edge. They learned the rhythms of the house, the voices of the clients, the kindness of friends who knew the same pain. As years passed, their bodies carried the marks of time. A laugh line at the corner of the mouth, a scar hidden beneath the skin, a weariness in the eyes. Some women found small comforts, a kind client who visited regularly, a coin saved carefully, a gift of perfume or ribbon that made them feel human again. Others faded quietly. They grew older, less desired, and were replaced by younger faces. For them, the nights grew longer, the rooms colder. Some moved into other work, washing clothes, serving ale in taverns, carrying the memories with them like invisible shadows. And yet, there was strength in the way they endured. Though the world seldom noticed, they carried within themselves stories of resilience. Each woman had a history of childhood laughter, of first loves, of dreams once bright. Even when buried beneath layers of survival, those memories flickered like hidden embers, never fully extinguished. Time took many things, but it also gave perspective. For those who remained, the brothel was not just a prison. It was a chapter. And in their quiet reflections, they came to see that they were not merely defined by what others thought of them. They were more survivors, storytellers, witnesses to life's harshest truths. And so, as the years passed, the brothel changed faces, changed voices, but the spirit of endurance lived on, carried in every woman who walked through its doors. Yet beneath the dim glow of lanterns, danger always lurked in the shadows. The women of the brothel lived with risks that stretched far beyond the walls of their chambers. Some nights, a client arrived drunk and angry, his temper quick to flare. Voices rose, doors slammed, and sometimes bruises followed. In those moments, survival meant silence, or the steady hands of sisters who comforted one another once the storm had passed. There were threats from outside as well, a rival tavern brawl spilling into the street, or thieves who saw the brothel as a place rich with coin. Guards were sometimes paid to look the other way, and justice rarely came for women whose voices were already ignored by society. Illness, too, cast a long shadow. In an age without medicine as we know it today, even a fever could turn deadly. Whispers of the great pox or other ailments spread from bed to bed, filling the air with quiet dread. The women knew too well how fragile their lives were, and yet courage lingered among them. They developed quiet ways to protect each other. A knock on the wall to warn of a violent guest, a shared remedy brewed from herbs, a sister who stepped in when another could not face a certain man. They learned, through necessity, to be guardians of one another's survival. The brothel was not only a place of desire and sorrow, it was also a place of danger. But in facing that danger, these women discovered a resilience that few could see. Beneath the shadows, their strength glimmered like hidden steel. Even in the darkest of nights, there were sparks of light. Life inside the brothel was not only sorrow and survival. Sometimes it was laughter, echoing softly down the hall. A joke whispered among the women as they dressed, or a playful tug at a ribbon while braiding each other's hair. There were nights when music drifted through the street, a minstrel playing the lute in the nearby square, his melody carrying into their chambers. Some of the women would pause in their tasks, closing their eyes, letting the notes lift them to another place, if only for a moment. Small gifts also brought joy. A coin carefully saved to buy a scented oil, a colorful scarf traded for at the market, a sweetmeat shared between friends. These little treasures were tokens of humanity in a world that often sought to strip it away. Sometimes joy came in the simplest form, a moment of quiet, a candle burning low, the silence of dawn after a long night, the chance to breathe deeply and feel, if only briefly, that they were free. And always, there was sisterhood, the warmth of a hand held in secret, the comfort of someone listening when the world felt too heavy. These moments, fragile as glass, were their armor. They reminded them that even in hardship, life was not only about suffering, it also carried laughter, music, and tenderness. It was in these small joys that the women found strength to face another night. And it was through these joys that hope, like a hidden flame, refused to be extinguished. Though their world was bound by walls and shadows, the women of the brothel carried secret dreams in their hearts. Love, for them, was both near and impossibly far. Each night they were surrounded by touch, yet true tenderness was something rare, something whispered only in imagination. Many longed not for passion, but for gentleness, a hand held without price, a kiss given without expectation. Some had once known such love, before life had led them here. Memories of a first sweetheart, of laughter shared in summer fields, of promises made under starlight. These lingered like faded perfume. Others dreamed of a love yet to come, sketching it quietly in their minds as they watched the world pass by through narrow windows. Now and then, a spark did flicker. A client who spoke with kindness, who treated them not as objects, but as women with souls. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though the walls had melted away, and they were simply two people sharing time together. Such moments rarely lasted, but their memory burned warm, even on the coldest nights. Longing stretched beyond romance, too. Some dreamed of children they might one day hold, of a home filled with laughter, of mornings where work was not survival, but joy. These were fragile dreams, but they gave the women strength to carry on. Love and longing, though often denied, became their secret companions. In silence, in candlelight, in the quiet beats of their hearts, they carried those dreams like hidden treasures, waiting, always waiting, for a world where they could be free. Outside the brothel's warm glow, the world was less forgiving. To the townsfolk, these women were shadows, necessary, but never embraced. Men visited them in secret, but in daylight they passed by without a glance, or worse, with eyes filled with disdain. Society demanded their services, yet denied them dignity. The church often cast them as sinners, speaking of fire and repentance. Preachers thundered about their fall, but rarely spoke of the hunger or hardship that had driven them here. To the righteous, their lives were cautionary tales, not human stories. Even among neighbors, they carried a mark. Shopkeepers charged them more. Mothers pulled children aside when they walked past, and whispers followed them in the market square. Their identities were reduced to a single word, a word heavy with judgment. And yet, in the quiet corners of their hearts, the women knew they were more than what the world saw. They were daughters once, sisters, perhaps even mothers. They were women who had dreams, laughter, and tears, like anyone else. But stigma built invisible walls, taller than the stone that surrounded the brothel. This weight was heavy, and it bent their backs, but it did not break them. For every cruel whisper, they had a song shared among themselves. For every judgmental gaze, they found comfort in the warmth of their sisterhood. And for every harsh sermon, they carried a secret truth, that humanity is never as simple or as pure as the world pretends it to be. The weight of stigma was real, crushing. But inside the brothel's walls, they created a space where they could still be human. Behind the brothel's heavy doors, where candlelight flickered and shadows stretched across the walls, stories flowed as freely as wine. Here, secrets were currency. A wealthy merchant, loosened by drink, confessed fears about his rivals. A soldier spoke of battles where his hands trembled more than his sword. A noble, stripped of his title and whispers, found comfort in being seen not as a lord, but simply as a man. The women listened, sometimes with patience, sometimes with a smile. They became keepers of confessions, vaults of truths that could never leave the room. In those moments, they were not merely companions of the flesh, but guardians of hidden lives. Among themselves, too, secrets were shared in hushed voices, tales of forbidden loves, dreams of escape, even gossip about powerful men who pretended virtue by day and surrendered to temptation by night. There was danger in such knowledge. A careless word outside these walls could bring ruin. And so, the brothel became a place of both pleasure and silence, where truths lived and died within candlelit rooms. To those who entered, the women offered not just bodies, but an ear, a quiet understanding, a promise that their hidden self was safe for one fleeting night. And in return, they carried with them a tapestry of whispered stories, fragments of the human soul that the world outside never saw. When the weight of the world grew too heavy, music rose within the brothel's walls. Strings were plucked, drums tapped softly, and voices lifted in song. The air filled with melodies both joyful and haunting, weaving a spell that turned the dimly lit rooms into places of escape. Women danced barefoot across the wooden floor, skirts swirling like waves in the glow of candlelight. Men clapped, laughed, and for a moment forgot their titles, their duties, their sins. Laughter mingled with rhythm, and the brothel became less a house of shadows and more a stage where sorrow was set aside. The dances were not only for the men. Often, the women danced for themselves. Arms outstretched, bodies moving with freedom rarely granted outside these walls. Their steps carried defiance. Their twirls carried joy. Their songs carried fragments of hope. In these moments, the brothel transformed. It was no longer a place of transaction, but a sanctuary of escape, where music silenced judgment and dance gave flight to weary souls. Here, the rich and the poor, the noble and the nameless, found themselves united in rhythm. For a few fleeting hours, life's burdens slipped away, and all that remained was song, movement, and the comforting illusion that happiness could last. Behind the laughter and the dancing, there was another truth. The brothel was not only a place of comfort, but also a machine of survival. Every smile, every song, every gentle touch had a price. Coins clinked on wooden tables, exchanged in whispers and quick gestures. Some men paid generously, eager to buy not just companionship, but the illusion of being truly seen. Others haggled, counting each coin as though love could be measured in copper and silver. The women knew these games well. They were not merely companions, they were negotiators, merchants of comfort, balancing charm with calculation. For some, the night's earnings meant food for their children. For others, it meant a chance to dream of freedom, a small fortune tucked away for an uncertain future. The madams who ran the houses kept careful ledgers, every coin recorded, every favor accounted for. It was a business, and in the business of desire, nothing was free. Even the candles that lit the rooms, even the wine that filled the cups, had been paid for by the coin of longing hearts. In this economy, bodies were not just bodies. They were survival, strategy, and strength. For every man who left lighter of purse and spirit, there was a woman counting, saving, and calculating how to endure another day. And so, behind the pleasure, there was always the sound of coins falling, the rhythm of survival, echoing louder than music or laughter. A brothel was never truly separate from the world outside. Power seeped through its doors, often disguised as laughter or kindness. Noblemen visited, their cloaks heavy with wealth and secrets. They whispered confessions they would never dare speak in the courts, and the women listened, holding their words like precious weapons. For knowledge was as valuable as gold. Guards and soldiers, too, came seeking pleasure, but they also offered protection. In return for favors or quiet payments, they watched the streets outside, ensuring that no rival gangs disturbed the house and no law grew too curious. The madam, clever and patient, knew how to balance these relationships. A gift of wine here, a promise of silence there. At times, a brothel became an unofficial court of politics, where alliances were born not in palaces, but in candlelit rooms filled with music and perfume. For kings and lords, these places could be both a refuge and a danger. Many rose from a woman's bed to make decisions that shaped entire kingdoms. Others fell, undone by secrets overheard and passed into the wrong ears. In the shadow of power, the brothel stood as both servant and master. It bent to survive, yet it shaped the fate of those who thought themselves untouchable. And in this delicate dance of desire and politics, women often held more influence than they were ever allowed to claim in the daylight. The brothel was more than a place of comfort. It was a vault of secrets. Here, behind closed doors, knights confessed sins they dared not tell their priests. Merchants revealed their schemes, the tricks they used to cheat and profit. And lords whispered plans for wars and betrayals, believing themselves safe in the warmth of a woman's embrace. The women listened, silent and steady. They carried these secrets like invisible jewels, knowing their value. A careless word, a smile at the right moment, and entire fortunes could change hands. Some brothels even thrived because their madams used these whispers to keep powerful men close, reminding them that silence was always more expensive than pleasure. Not all secrets were of power. Some were softer, sadder. A soldier wept over the blood on his hands. A young noble admitted his fear of inheriting lands he did not want. A husband confessed his guilt for loving another. In those dimly lit rooms, shadows became confessionals, and bodies became shelters for trembling souls. But secrets, like shadows, could not always be contained. Sometimes they leaked into the streets, destroying reputations, ending lives, and igniting scandals that echoed far beyond the brothel walls. And yet, for every secret exposed, 100 more remained safe in the silence of candlelight and whispered promises. The brothel was a world of shadows where truth lived, half hidden, waiting for the right ear to catch it. In the brothel, nothing was ever entirely real, and nothing was entirely false. It was a place of masks, where truth and illusion danced together in flickering candlelight. A soldier might enter seeking only warmth for a single night, yet leave believing he had found love. A lonely merchant might convince himself that the laughter he bought was genuine, that the hand resting on his was placed there by choice, not by coin. For the women, illusion was both shield and survival. Their smiles, their sighs, their tender words, these were carefully painted strokes in a living artwork of desire. But within that illusion, sometimes a spark of truth appeared, a laugh that was not forced, a touch that lingered longer than it should, a glance that revealed a longing too deep to hide. The brothel was a stage, and every person who stepped inside became an actor in its endless play. The walls held echoes of thousands of performances, some tragic, some joyful, some never meant to be remembered. And yet, the illusion was not cruelty. For many, it was mercy. A broken-hearted knight could believe for a moment that he was cherished. A widowed man could pretend that love still lived beside him. Even if it was only a dream, it was a dream worth paying for. In the dance of illusion, reality softened, and people became who they wished to be, if only until dawn. Time moved differently within those candlelit walls. Days and years slipped away like wine poured into a cup, vanishing before anyone realized it was gone. The knight who once came with shining armor grew older, his visits fewer, his steps slower. The merchant who laughed loudly at every feast eventually left, swallowed by debts or age. The courtesans themselves, once radiant with youth, felt time's touch in the quiet ways, in lines around their eyes, in the ache of rising each morning, in the fading sparkle of a voice that once sang without end. And yet, for every departure, new faces always appeared. Fresh laughter replaced old silence. New songs filled the air where old ones had faded. The brothel, like the world outside, never stopped moving. For some women, the passing years meant freedom. They saved enough coin, left the life behind, and disappeared into towns and villages where no one knew their names. Others remained, becoming the keepers of stories, wise women who guided the young, their presence like a candle that refused to burn out. The brothel stood through wars, through famines, through winters and springs. Outside, kingdoms rose and fell, banners changed, kings died and were replaced. But inside those dim rooms, the rhythm remained the same. Laughter, whispers, confessions, and dreams. Time could not stop it. Time only layered it deeper, turning every corner into a memory, every bed into a graveyard of forgotten desires and fleeting joys. And so the brothel lived on, not untouched by time, but carried by it, like a fragile boat on an endless river. At last, the brothel's story, like all stories, came to its quiet end. The wooden beams that once echoed with music grew old, groaning in the silence. The paint on the walls faded, the silk curtains grew thin, and the once glowing lanterns sputtered out one by one. The women who had filled the halls with laughter and whispers moved on, some to new towns, some to families of their own, and some to the embrace of eternal rest. Their voices lingered only as faint echoes in memory, like distant bells tolling in a forgotten village. No war destroyed the brothel, no fire consumed it. Instead, it simply faded, like a candle burning to its last flicker, leaving behind only a wisp of smoke in the night. Yet the brothel never truly vanished. It lived on in the hearts of those who once passed through its doors. In the memory of a soldier who, for a night, believed he was loved. In the mind of a courtesan who, for a brief moment, forgot the weight of her burdens and danced as though she were free. The brothel was never only about desire. It was about being human, fragile, longing, searching for warmth in the coldness of the world. And in that search, every soul who entered its halls found a piece of themselves, however fleeting. As the final curtain fell, the brothel did not die. It transformed into legend, into whispers told in taverns, into half-remembered songs carried by wandering minstrels. And so, dear listener, as you drift into sleep, remember this. The brothel was never just a house of pleasure. It was a mirror of humanity itself, a place where masks were worn and removed, where illusion and truth danced, and where the deepest longings of the human heart were revealed in the quiet glow of candlelight. Now, let the candles dim, let the music fade, and may the story rest softly in the silence of night.